All right, everybody, we are back on the pod with a very special guest. Kevin Donahue is back. He is back on the pod to begin this. It's sort of going to be like a podcast within a podcast. It's going to be our mysticism series. I was thinking about titling it Mysticism. This will be Mysticism 1, where we're going to be diving into the Bhagavad Gita and also uh, I guess, the description of God from the point of view of Seth, which we'll get into who Seth is later. Welcome, Evan. It's good to have you back.
Thank you, Greg. I'm excited to be back.
Perfect. Are you ready to join or find union with the divine force of being, find union with God?
Are you asking me? Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Daily.
Daily, I'm trying to find union with God. Every time I
Daily.
drink coffee, I think that's kind of part of it. So I kind of want to start off today's podcast. But before we get into the Bhagavad Gita, I wanted to start off. Um, so I texted you something today. I was talking about how I was listening to a podcast yesterday, specifically the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. And those of you who don't know the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, you may know Midnight Gospel on Netflix. Kevin, I know you've heard of it. Um, and there's something that he said on there. He was saying how even negative energy towards God is still like the first step towards finding some kind of union with the divine. Because there's something I told you today is in that the reason why like someone starts to hate God or hate Christianity or hate like whatever religion they were brought up in, um, part of that is because the people who were pressuring them to be in that religion, they weren't really, they were kind of like broadcasting God as like this, basically this totalitarian dictator that didn't accept who you are for what you are and for who you are exactly as you are. There wasn't an unconditional love, there wasn't an unconditional forgiveness. And because of that, you feel betrayed. And with that betrayal, you start to hate that form of the religion. You start to hate that form of God. And it's almost like getting like not bewitched, but like you're getting fooled almost like from a young age into thinking God is one thing, and then you start and then, like from there, like I'm looking into like physics. I become obsessed with like with like astronomy, astrophysics, the Big Bang, stuff like that. And I think part of that is my own yearning to find the divine, find something bigger than myself, right? And like as I get older, like, I wrote The Man Who Killed God. I changed it to On Death and God. And a lot of that was from my hatred for it. But like as I was writing the book, I started finding this like love for God and this union with God. And I started like I started from hating Christianity to like, you know what? Actually, I kind of love Jesus. Like I kind of get it. And like I love the Buddha and I love all these religions and like for my psychedelic experiences also in the past, like kind of getting that union with God. But anyhow, that's my rant, Kevin, for the
Yeah, I
day.
like that. Basically what Greg was quoting was
DTFH.
like, what is it?
We'll just call it the
Oh,
DTFH.
DG. That's worse for me. I have like a
All
stutter.
right,
Um,
go ahead.
Basically, and I was in total agreement that like these sort of narrow-minded concepts of God are easy to hate for us
Yep.
because I feel like there's something within us that's trying to point that like, okay, these characteristics that you have attributed to
Yep.
like the source of all creation are just not it. Like,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
and I feel like the soul revolts when we hear such like um repressive ideas and
Yeah.
um I like this concept that because God is unlimited, any characteristic that you attribute to it or him or her is already a limitation. So it can't be
Mm,
true already
yeah,
because you've are any characteristic is a limitation and God itself doesn't have, it's too
limitations.
unlimited. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I liked what you said. It was like a betrayal of the soul or like a revolt of the soul.
Yeah, I feel like our like the soul has like inherent properties, sort of intuitions, whether they're sort of way below consciousness, way
Yeah,
below the ego, or more to the surface.
yep,
Um, I feel like that's why there's a commonality between um, all of the world's religions and philosophies. There's that thread there because that
yep.
those intuitions are sort of inherent in the deeper layers.
Yeah, and I did want to mention like so like in the Bhagavad Gita, what God is kind of spelled out like specifically where he's
Sorry, my brother's microwaving food.
no, no, you're good. You're good. I was just gonna say, like in the Bhagavad Gita, what God is spelled out kind of specifically. Like God is this, like I am this, Krishna is saying, and we'll get into this in a little bit. But in the Bible, in Christianity, what God is spelled out over like 100 different stories. So a lot of people will take one of those stories and say this is God, and then attribute that to God, and then that's when your soul revolts at that idea, right?
Yeah, no, I like that. Like someone might take the God of the Old Testament and sort of be like,
Yeah,
oh, that's this very highly repressive God. But you like most Christians will say, um, there's like this overarching narrative that's meant to be understood. You're supposed to understand the
yeah,
God of the Old Testament so that you can understand the God of the New Testament.
yeah. Or like even like someone might take the story of Abraham like sacrificing Isaac, and if that's the only story they read from the Bible, then that might be their only conception of what God is, right? Um, so I think in my opinion, I think that's why there's a lot of like Satanism. That's why there's a lot of like anti-Christianity language out there, because there's a lot of people out there who take things from the Bible and use it to not accept other people or like who they are. I think like an easy example would be like uh, gay people, obviously. Um, Evan, my man.
As far as like the sort of homophobic God of the
Yeah,
Old Testament, um, I don't know. It's tough because if that's the God that people believe in and the God that we have to respect that they believe in, that's uh fine. But I feel like the thing is like I don't know how to say it.
like without offending someone, or like he's just not sure how to say it.
Well, just that like any description of God is inherently limiting. So even the
Yeah,
descriptions of God in the Bible are going to be limiting. Even Seth's description of God is going to be limiting
yeah,
because we're
limiting.
trying to take something that's beyond form and language and to
Yeah,
sort of collapse it into language and form.
yeah,
Uh, and another thing is like everything sort of comes through the sort of mind of a person. Like any, let's say someone has a direct experience of the divine, whatever that might mean to them,
yeah,
it still gets filtered through the subconscious, through the unconscious, through the conscious mind, and eventually the ego is made
yeah,
aware of it. Um, it passes through so many layers of the psyche
yeah,
and is sort of necessarily convoluted um, in that sort of journey. So even if, uh, for example, many people, prophets or whatever in the Bible might have had some legitimate experiences, some
yeah,
expansive revelations, it doesn't mean that their personal subconscious just automatically disappeared. If there
yeah,
was some sort of homophobia in the society beforehand, or just due to their personal beliefs, that message could be distorted.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
I'm trying to think of like a good example of this, like a distortion that sort of happens through translation, but
Well,
I'll
I
have
think
to
just
think.
like in general, you can have like an epiphany and it sounds so great, so wonderful, and then you write it down and then you read it and you're like this doesn't sound as amazing as like when I first heard it, because the feeling isn't attached to it anymore, because like part of having an epiphany is the feeling of the epiphany, not just like the thoughts itself.
Yes, I
It's like
really like
more than
that.
just the thought.
Yes, that happens so often. That's
Yeah.
so true. Like the part of the epiphany is the emotion of it that you feel. And when you read it
Yeah.
later, you're like, oh, that wasn't that. That epiphany wasn't that
Yeah.
insightful.
It's almost like it had that like divine energy in it when you first conceived of it, but when you like say like gave birth to it, I guess one might say like when you wrote it down, it um like it took on a physical form, and in its physical form, it no longer had that like godlike feeling to it, you know.
Yeah.
So realistic. All right. So I think with that said, are you ready to dive into the Bhagavad,
Yeah,
Kevin?
let's read that.
Let's do it. It's not that long. I think we should be able to just read the whole thing and kind of stop at points to,
Hmm.
to talk about it. Um, so this is chapter 7, the yoga of wisdom and realization. So I think, in my opinion, this is kind of one of the best chapters from the Bhagavad Gita to that kind of describes what God is. And in this perspective, God is Arjuna, which is kind of like the god of all gods. Um, or sorry, not Arjuna, Krishna. And then Krishna is talking to Arjuna. So I'll
I was
start here.
wondering about that. Cool.
Yeah, so like Krishna is kind of like the god of gods, and then Arjuna is, I guess, the prophet in a way, like the person that God is speaking to.
All right.
Um, so we'll just start here. O Arjuna, hear how you shall without doubt know me fully, with the mind intent on me, practicing yoga and taking refuge in me. So he's almost like he kind of starts off saying, "Hey, this is how you can know me fully." Kind of like telling him to practice yoga, and take refuge in me, take refuge in God. I shall declare to thee in full this knowledge combined with direct realization. After knowing which nothing more here remains to be known. Here remains to be known. So I think this like direct realization line, what do you think that means, Kevin? Like as far as like, does it,
That's what I would say is the difference between Western religion and
yep,
philosophy and Eastern. Eastern philosophy really stresses, and I don't mean that very literally Western, because there are
yep,
Western sort of, or like whatever philosophies that originate in the
yeah,
West that emphasize direct realization. But I would say that's sort of like one of the pinnacles of the Eastern
yeah,
yogas. Uh,
yeah, or like most Western religion as it stands today.
yeah, yeah, as it stands today.
Yep,
I like this because he's saying you need to marry knowledge with direct realization. I think that's what that's saying. I shall declare to thee in full this knowledge combined with direct realization. So it's not enough for the intellect to like know of God or to be able to conceptualize it. You need
yeah.
that directive sort of revelation.
Like you can't just read this passage and oh, I know God, right? You also need to have that direct experience with God too. Kind of have that like initiation into it in a way. All right. Among thousands of men, one perchance strives for perfection. Even among those successful strivers, only one perchance knows me in essence. So like, so basically, most people don't. really strive for mysticism, and those who do out of those who do strive for mysticism, only a select few kind of like, I guess, reach enlightenment or reach union with God, one might say, for lack of a better term.
And I feel
Um,
like
yeah, go ahead.
it's it's sort of pointing out like the rarity of it, and I think this has a lot to do with um, even though a lot of people might be striving for those perfections or that union through their various like schools of thought, it's very difficult to like let go of all of the constructs in your mind that sort of separate you
Yeah,
like from that divinity. Because if
yeah,
no matter what construct it is, even if it's like very sort of enlightening of a construct, like, oh, God is unlimited, that's still just a construct that you have to let go of in order to sort of step outside of yourself enough
yeah.
to witness.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I was reading in the Seth passage, where you kind of have to see outside of your ego, right? Um, okay, so I like this part. It starts to bring in like the elements into this. Um, earth, water, fire, air, ether, which is kind of like emptiness, mind, intellect, and egoism. Thus is my nature divided eightfold. So it kind of starts to describe itself in both physical and non-physical terms. It is both basically everything that's physical, it's nothingness.
Yeah, he's like attributing these different characteristics of reality and saying all of them together are the nature of
Yep,
God. But it's interesting because this next passage says this is the inferior nature. O mighty armed Arjuna, know thou is different from it, my higher nature, the very element by which this world is upheld. So I think he's kind of saying, like, even though my nature appears divided and eightfold, it really is just the
one
one
thing.
element. Yeah, that's what I think
Yep.
that's saying.
Yeah, the very life element by which the world, my higher prakriti, nature, the very life element by which my nature is unfold. Yeah, so well, and like in the Seth thing, it was talking about how God is kind of more like an energy gestalt. So it's like,
It's not any of those things or even like the sum of them.
yeah,
But
yeah, it's like
yeah,
more than the sum of, like, it is all of these things, but it's more than the sum of them,
yes, yeah.
right? Know that these two, my higher and lower natures, are the womb of all beings. Okay, so I am the source and dissolution of the whole universe. The source, so it's both the birth and death of the universe. And if you go to like that famous um Oppenheimer quote, I am become death, destroyer of worlds. That's also
That
Arjuna saying that.
that's a
Um,
Bhagavad Gita quote, right?
yep,
I
yep.
yeah.
Hold on. I am coughing hardcore right now,
That's okay.
right during the pod. Okay.
I'll start. Okay.
What?
I was like, I can start reading the next passage.
Oh yeah, yeah, go for it.
There is nothing whatsoever higher than me, O Arjuna. All this is strung on me as clusters of gems on a string. I like that. Like saying he is the string of which all else like depends on and is strung upon. Um,
Yeah. And I think
like
this gives like a good context for, 'cause, like, a lot of time, like in the Bible, a lot of times it says like only worship me, like don't worship anything else, like I am the highest being. Um and I think if you read this first, it can almost give like context to that God from the Bible, like in a way. Like if
yep,
you read the Bible through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita, I think you can almost have like a better perception of what God is as you're reading through it.
yep. Well, it's like uh, all of this is strung on me as clusters of gems on a string. And
Yep.
maybe someone is busy worshiping some lesser element of
Yeah.
that manifests in nature, maybe like the trees or something, and that's
Yeah.
just a gem on the string. So why not just focus on the string of which everything else depends?
Yeah, but at the same time, bringing your attention to the tree and like say like worshiping the tree, finding beauty in it, that is kind of like a stepping stone towards finding the string,
Yes. Yeah, I
right?
agree.
Yeah, you can grab onto the gem and you can kind of see where the string leads to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, and I think so you were talking about like chaos magic and things like that. I think a lot of like with chaos magic, it's very similar to like Jungian active imagination, where you like find an entity in your mind and you start to like talk with that entity. And I think that's kind of what like paganism was. Like you find a specific god to help you through something.
Right. I guess whatever they felt closest to or most.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't think there was anything sort of wrong with that either. Like the sort of, I feel like there was a lot of wisdom to be gained from
yeah,
focusing on just like the gods of nature as explanations. It helped them feel a part of nature,
yeah,
whereas we sort of feel so apart from it now. We don't really
yeah,
consider ourselves a part of nature as a human species.
yeah. We're like we're separate from nature, and I think a lot of that also has to do with like the mind body dualism. Like our body
Mhm.
is nature, and therefore our mind must be separate, right?
I think it has to do also with like sort of the influence of Abrahamic faith,
Oh
because
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%.
Abrahamic faith sort of puts a God that's outside of
Yep,
nature, apart from, I
yep.
think in sort of Christian doctrine, they acknowledge God as immanent in all of reality, but it's not in all of reality.
Like
Whereas
it,
here,
yeah,
I think in sort of the sort of Hindu Bhagavad Gita perspective, it's both within but beyond all reality. But
yep,
within the Christian doctrine, he's not even sort of like within it in a way. It's
yeah. He
completely
like he's
separate.
not his creation, right?
And I think that sort of distinction and that offshooting from that faith sort of can be responsible for man's changing opinions or evolving perspective of nature and
Yeah,
feeling apart from it as well. We put God away from nature, so we are not
yep,
in nature.
yeah. Because well, there's like it's also because we want to associate ourselves with the divine almost, right? As well, there's also like this instinct where like we need to be a part of God and in his own image, and therefore we can't be nature,
Right.
right?
Or
Even though
well,
like most of nature is absolutely gorgeous.
or it could be seen as like the appreciation of nature is the worshiping of a false idol as well.
Oh,
And God said, "Thou shalt have no idols besides me." So this sort of over appreciation over sort of connection with nature could be seen as having an idol other than sort of like the one true
mm,
God, which probably contributed further to a sort of splitting off, like, oh,
yeah.
we can appreciate it to a certain degree as the sort of creation, but not to put it in the forefront of our focus.
Well, and there's also like the stuff in like the I think Genesis where like man is supposed to be like the protector of nature, right?
Does
Cultivate
it
the
say that?
earth.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like man is supposed to cultivate the earth, which one could be interpreted as farming the earth, but cultivate also means protect and like allow it to grow and
Right.
flourish.
I feel like I've never heard that one. I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to look
no,
that up.
in Genesis, God like says like now you are condemned to cultivate the earth or like something like
Oh,
that, right?
is that the
It's like
quote
his
that
punishment.
Okay, because I know there's like a certain passage or something that people use as like an excuse, I guess, not to care about the environment or the animals. Because I do know he says you have dominion over
Yep.
the animals or something like that.
Yep,
Um,
yep, that like we're in charge of all the animals. But like part of being in charge of them, being responsible for them is caring for them,
it's
right?
caring for them. Yeah, exactly. I like
Yep.
that.
And
Here's
also like you said that thing about like you cannot have no idols other than me. It's that's almost similar to this line up here where it says um there's nothing whatsoever higher than me, right?
mhm.
Um
But
just
once you've reached me, you've like it said there's nothing more else to be known
yeah.
since
Yep.
it is already all things.
Yep.
I like this next quote here where it says, I am the sapidity in water, I am the light in the moon and the sun. I am the syllable Om in all Vedas, the sound in ether and virility in men. I really like that.
Yeah,
I
what
think by
does reality mean?
I thought that meant like libido or something, but I maybe I'm tripping.
Yep. Yeah, the quality of having strength, energy, and a strong sex drive, manliness,
Oh, okay.
virility,
Like this,
strength.
like vitality. Okay.
Yep. Like
I like
vitality.
when I like passages, no matter where they come from, that sort of like give metaphors for it,
Yep.
metaphors for God that are relatable, and sort
Mm,
of accentuate how imminent it is in like all of reality and things that we can relate to. Like I'm the
yeah.
sound of the wind, I'm the grass you walk on, I'm like the
Yep.
clouds in the sky, whatever, whatever.
A
I love
sunset.
I'm the sunset, yeah.
Yeah.
I am the sweet fragrance in earth and the brilliance in fire, the life in all beings, and I am austerity in aesthetics. I forget what austerity is, but probably like
Austerity.
focus, maybe.
Let's look it up. Sternness or severity of manner or attitude. So yeah, like focus. The auster it's like yeah, like a sternness. Like it's kind of like what make it's stream plainly. All right, condition. All right, I feel like I feel stupid looking this up. But wait, why is there austerity kills? But what? All right, all right, all right. Yeah, it's kind of just like yeah, like a sternness, like you're saying. Sweet fragrance in earth and the brilliance in fire. Know me, O Arjuna, as the eternal seed of all beings. I am the intelligence. I am the intelligence of the intelligent. The splendor of the splendid objects am I.
Where are you
So
reading
it's
that
like,
at? Oh,
right
I
here,
see.
line 10.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this brings me back to like Plato's theory of the forms, where like God is the forms. It's like the perfect ideal of things. And like it's what gives a splendid object its splendor. It's what gives an intelligent man its intelligence, right?
Yeah,
It's what gives beautiful things beauty. Of the strong, I am the strength devoid of desire and attachment, and in all beings, I am the desire unopposed to Dharma, or Arjuna. The desire unopposed to Dharma.
unopposed. So Dharma being like the sort of great truth, I guess. So desire that's in line with the great truth. And I guess
Yeah,
this is where I would have some like disagreements with the Bhagavad Gita.
go ahead, go
Um,
ahead.
like I am the strength devoid of desire and attachment. Sort of this follows, in my opinion, the old line thinking that desire and attachment are sort of antithetical to
Yeah,
divinity or spirituality when desire and attachment arise from, or maybe not attachment, but desire arises from sort of the soul or arises in divinity.
yeah.
Um, and
It's kind of like where Seth, because like Seth was talking about like desire and dreams being like fundamental aspect of God
Oh, right. Yeah,
almost.
like yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to get to that. I that the set description is I have it blocked out of my mind for now so that I can focus on this.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a sort of unnecessary, how do you say, like strictness placed upon God in a lot of these sort of
Mhm.
older
Yep.
organized religions. And we sort of squandered
Mhm.
um, the joy of God, like the desire and the dance and the bliss. Um,
Yeah, because it's like what if I desire to go see a beautiful sunset? Like part of that is my desire to like seek God, right? Like to seek something beautiful.
well, even
And
like
in
something
yeah, go ahead.
even something that we wouldn't consider spiritual at all, like the desire to go to the bar could be seen as something like antithetical to spiritual development or whatever, but
Mhm.
it's a part of the experience, the sort of we selected to be a part of. Um,
Yep.
and like you can sort of gain perspective no matter where you're at. Um, and that's, I guess, what
Yeah.
I would say my disagreement is this sort of idea that it's like this sort of strict ascetic path, this sort of narrow thing, when it's actually just available.
Yeah.
I feel it's available just in any sort of activity, I guess you
Well,
could
and
say.
desire is what leads us to do the things that we do, right? Um, and like I mean, obviously I think in the Bhagavad Gita, when they talk about desire, that they're mainly talking about like things that like are like quick desires, like quick happinesses or like
Right.
quick
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
fleeting pleasures.
Hmm.
Not necessarily like the desire to find union with God. Um, like more like, like going to the bar, right? But at the same time, what if you go to the bar and you meet like, I don't know, someone who then ends up changing your life forever? Like your desire to go to the bar led you down a road that brought you somewhere towards like mysticism or towards finding some kind of higher truth or going down some kind of quote unquote higher path,
Right. Or
you
you get alcohol poisoning and have a near death experience and you meet God that way. Like,
know?
could it be considered yoga then? Alcohol poisoning.
Fuck it, man. I'm going down. Can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
All right, you can go ahead. I keep coughing whenever I read it.
Okay. Whatever being and objects that are pure, active, and inert know that they have oh, I need to read that again. Whatever being and objects that are pure, active, and inert know that they proceed from me. They are in me, and yet I am not in them. Now, I do
Okay,
wonder
so
what it means by that.
they are in me, yet whatever being and objects that are pure, active, and inert know that they proceed from me. They proceed from me. They come from me, and they are in me,
Oh,
yet I am not in them. So it's kind of like,
I guess no, it makes sense. It's kind of saying the whole of me obviously isn't in none of these objects that you can see.
yeah, like for instance, like I'm not God, but I come from God, right? I'm in God, but God isn't in me, which like makes it like the ocean can't be inside of me, right? But I can be inside the ocean.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can float in the ocean, I can be in the ocean, but the ocean will never be inside of me because it's like way too big, and that's just impossible, right?
Yeah, no, I think I
Um,
like read it in a weird way. Like I'm not in them kind of sounded like a contradiction to
yeah,
something earlier, but maybe not. Deluded
yeah.
by these natures, states, or things composed of the three qualities of nature, all this world does not know me as distinct from them and immutable.
Does not know me as distinct, deluded by so. Okay, so we're
Forms.
yeah, like we're okay. deluded by these nature states composed of the three qualities of nature. All this world does not know me as distinct from them and immutable. So like we don't know God is distinct from us or or
Like no one has had, or like the world doesn't, there's like that quality of God that exists completely separate from any form,
yeah,
states, or things. And that's the quality that most people don't know, because I feel like it's sort of saying we're transfixed by the forms,
yeah,
uh, even names that we give to God,
yeah.
or just the forms around us, just the reality that we find ourselves, but we don't know God's independent nature, the immutable parts, the sort of
Yeah.
infinite part.
Well, we can go to like the Tao Te Ching, right? Like the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao,
Right.
you know. If you can name God, it's not God, right? Like just like what you're saying, if God has any qualities, if you can name a quality of God, um, that quality is already debunked because God is everything, you know.
And just like beyond any sort of like
Box that you can put
language,
like,
right?
yeah,
Because our language develops from, I guess this is the word that Seth would use, is the camouflage system that we're in. So by virtue of being a camouflage language in a camouflage world, which we could say is like being in a video game, it inherently it cannot describe layers of God or reality that exist beyond its manifestation in that camouflage system. So any language that we can come up with from our camouflage system is already not enough.
that sounded like a Freudian slip. And then it sounded like you said Camelot.
Did I say Camelot? Oh,
Harris. Nah.
boat
Um,
Camelot.
I
No.
also wanted to say that like we can't part of this also is that like just like what I was saying earlier with like the ocean can't be inside of me, right? So if you try to
Mhm.
fit God in a box, like the box will never be big enough, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's what it was sort of trying to point out. It reminds me of that Rumi quote, your whole ocean analogy, where he says, I am, this is why I kind of like was taken aback by that part.
Yeah.
This Rumi quote says, I am not the drop, or you are not the drop in the ocean, you are the whole ocean in a drop. So it's sort of, he's sort of speaking about the microcosm,
Wow,
macrocosm
you got that right.
at aspect.
I just
What, the
fact check.
quote?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I looked up the quote. You said it exactly how it is. Like literally.
yeah, I love Rumi, but he's sort of saying like, you are not the drop in the ocean, you're the whole ocean in the drop, sort of
Entire
speaking to
ocean in a drop.
the macrocosm is contained within every aspect of the microcosm. So that's why
Yeah,
when this Bhagavad Gita, theoretically, uh,
yeah,
that's why that quote kind of threw me off in the Bhagavad Gita, where it says, "I am not
yeah.
in them." Um,
Yeah, it well, it
but I understand what I think it's saying is you
but
can't
it
point
can be
to
both in a
anything.
sense, right?
Yeah,
Like it can be both. Like you can have God within you, but also, hey, like, but the whole of God isn't within you. Like,
right.
sure, like, like we have an aspect of it, and like maybe we do have all of it within us, but um, it's not accessible to us in a sense. Kind
Or
of
just
like
by
how,
saying,
yeah,
or
yeah,
just by saying like this computer is God, and we should worship the computer since God is in it.
yeah.
Like that
Oh,
that would be creating like an we'd be worshiping the wrong thing, even if
yeah,
God is in the computer. So I
yeah.
understand what the
So
quote is like
it,
saying, I
it
guess.
it's also like from like a teacher student perspective, like you don't want to confuse people and
Yeah.
have them start thinking that anything.
Yeah,
to be
like this
God,
is God, that's God. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like from both perspectives, I think are correct. I love the Rumi quote though. It's like you are the entire ocean in a drop. And it's kind of like if you can become introspective enough and like look within yourself, you can then start to explore that ocean, you know.
And expand.
Yep.
There's
And expand.
there seems to be this like paradoxical situation that goes on like with people who start to explore inward is the
Mm,
more inward you go, the more sort of expansive and outward you become as well.
mm,
Like it's like this, you would think that by sort of closing your eyes and engaging in some kind of inner contemplation, you would be sort of retreating inward. But it also has this other effect where you become aware of more around you.
yep.
Um, and I think that sort of parallels this whole microcosm macrocosm idea is the more you're aware of yourself, you're actually becoming more aware of the system as a whole because the system
Yep.
is within you and you are within.
But I'm gonna move this box here so when I look at you, my eyes are more like towards the camera.
Oh, I was
Uh,
like reading the whole document on my own page, so I wasn't saying okay.
what? Wait, what?
I had a separate page open for the document, so I didn't even have like the Zoom open
Oh yeah,
to
no, I
look.
mean that's totally fine. I'm just saying like I'm realizing I have two screens, so like I'm realizing that I had like the box because like whenever you're talking, I was looking at the box, but it was like on the far right side of my other screen. So I just moved it over here. Uh, all right, all right, hold up. Where are we at?
That's where we're at, is right here.
Okay, all right. Deluded by these natures, states or things composed of three qualities of nature. All this world is okay, so we just talked about that. So we're on number 14.
Verily, this divine illusion of mind, made up of the qualities of nature, is difficult to cross over. Those who take refuge in me alone cross over this illusion. I like that.
Mm.
Verily, this divine illusion of mine, made up of all the qualities of nature, is difficult to cross over. Those who take refuge in me alone cross over this illusion.
So he's kind of talking about the illusion of reality, right? Um, and it's kind of like it's a divine illusion. Like the God has made reality, and this reality appears to the conscious being as a divine illusion. And the only way to navigate through that illusion is to take refuge in that God and that God alone.
Right. And I think this is where sort of yoga comes in.
Hmm.
Yoga meaning yoke or union,
Hmm.
and me alone is like a one-pointed awareness. You need that
Yeah.
sort of one-pointed concentration so that these illusions can sort of dissipate around you, whether they're sense impressions or thoughts or emotions. You can hold on to that one idea and sort of
Yeah.
soar
And
through the
like,
abyss.
and I feel like part of that, like in meditation, right? You're paying attention to all your senses and kind of going past the ego. And in so doing, you kind of become aware of everything around you. And part of that is kind of um, you're almost trying to melt your own individuality to kind of not necessarily become everything around you, but um, kind
Expand
of
your
be
sense
in,
of self to include maybe
yeah,
more around you.
yes, exactly. And I think like that in and of itself is taking refuge in the divine, right?
I
Because
would
you're
say,
kind of, yeah, go ahead.
I guess this is where we can talk about like a distinction between sort of the Seth's material and
Yep.
some of like these Eastern sort of concepts, or even in Christianity and Abrahamic faiths, where
Yeah.
there's a sort of thread where they say you sort of have to let go of yourself. Like in Buddhism, you have to
Yep.
let go of the illusion of the self, or in Hinduism, where asceticism was seen as a path to the divine, you have to let go of your desires. You have to let go of your sort of sense of self in a way and like replace it with this one point in concentration. That's where I would say Seth sort of does something revolutionary, in that he sort of does away with all of that. And he's like, what are you guys talking about? Like God, uh, the inner self works through your desires, like works
Mhm.
through like your daily activities.
Yep.
Like there's nowhere you can go where there's no separation at all.
There's no
So
escape.
yeah, there's like, there's no escape from the source of like what you are. Uh, and there's no need for this like strict sort of path, like
Mhm.
in a way. So I feel like that's one of the main distinctions between like what the author of what we'll read next and these sort of
Yep.
organized materials. And it's something that I feel like was new to me to hear.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. But I do think like having some kind of a structure, um, at least for some people, like because like with Seth, that's kind of more like an idea, right? Like that's and sure, like those concepts might be true, but from the Bhagavad Gita perspective, I think this is something where they're trying to create a structure within like the
Right.
society, right? So it's also like
That's
kind of
what,
a religious thing, you
right.
know?
And that's what yoga's sort of purpose is. And this is what
Yep.
is like really cool about yoga is they're really big on the systematic approaches. They don't just try to
Yep.
say, believe us, they have like a whole system,
Yep.
like they could walk anyone from point A to
Mhm.
wherever
Point
they
B.
want to go. And that's
Yeah.
what's can be appreciated about it. And that's what that sort of yoga or one pointed concentration is necessary for those people who
Yep.
really want to find that discipline, and that disciplined path toward
Yeah.
that union.
I also wanted to mention, just like as we're reading this, just keep in mind that this is translated into English and it's translated into English by an English speaker, right? So when we read this, a lot of these words are taken up. The words chosen are chosen by the translator, right? So a lot of these words like God or demons um, are kind of can kind of frame some of these things from like a Western perspective. So it's like keep that in mind that these don't necessarily mean the same things in the East, right? I think, but like this is like the best translation we that they can find, right? So like the word demons doesn't necessarily mean like the way of like the Christian demons or like the demons depicted in demon movies, like in
Maybe
horror
just like
movies, but
lesser spirits or something.
yeah, or like bad spirits that bring you down a bad path, right? A path that brings you, say, away from the divine. Um, and in the Christian lens, that'd be like sin, right? Sin brings you away from God, out of
We
grace.
didn't we didn't read this quote.
No, no, we didn't. No, no. The evildoers and the deluded, who are the lowest of men, those damn fools, do not seek me. They whose knowledge is destroyed by illusion follow the ways of demons.
I really like this
Um,
quote.
yeah, I think it's really applicable to the modern day,
Yeah,
especially because there has been no other time in human history where there have been so many, like, where we've had so much access to lies, illusions, and been so immersed in a fake reality, right? There has never been a time in human history where uh, we've been so immersed in like a completely fake, distorted reality, which we find on our phones. And then and then basically imagine and immerse ourselves within our minds. Um, like you see so many people today who like, like even us, like, right? Before this, we started watching the debate and we're like, man, we want to keep watching. But like part of that debate is that it's this fantasy world that we're not involved in. Like we're not Kamala, we're not Trump, we're not on that stage, right? We're not the controllers of the machine. And we're getting like entrenched in these fantasy realities, watching all these YouTube videos and seeing all these posts on Facebook or Twitter, or like wherever you watch things. Um, like even me being like addicted to podcasts, I'll listen to podcasts at work like all the time. And I think it takes my attention away from the reality right in front of my face and instead puts it inside of this fake reality. Um, yeah, I mean that's my rant there. What do you
I
think
like
about
it.
this?
I like it. It feels like it's saying knowledge that is sort of misguided, or like knowledge that comes from the illusion, or knowledge that isn't being directed by like the divine or like the intuitions, like could be led astray. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think when you said this applies a lot to the modern world, I feel like it does.
Yep.
Like we've sort of propped up the intellect and the knowledge of the intellect, and we sort of consider it superior to like everything else. And
Hmm.
we've forgotten about the wisdom in the intuition and in emotions and like feeling and just ways of knowing that are not associated with the intellect. So I really like this. They whose knowledge is destroyed by illusion follow the ways of demons, sort of just misguided knowledge or knowledge that arises out of the illusion. I like that.
Yep. Yeah, like you get like led astray to and like well, I think one might argue too that um at least in this realm of thought within the Bhagavad Gita, desire, like part of what desire is an illusion, right? It's something created by the brain. Um and like created by the brain and the ego, right? It's like you desire things because you view yourself as an individual.
Right.
And I think part of that is kind of like what it is part of the illusion that they were referring to, right? Which doesn't necessarily mesh well with Seth, right? When we start getting into Seth, but I think like from this like Bhagavad Gita perspective, desire is like one of the biggest illusions there is.
I feel like it gets complicated because there's the desires of the ego, and then there's the desires of sort of, we could say, inner portions of the self.
Mm,
And
yeah,
the ego might have a desire to like rob someone next door. And obviously, if you were to just follow every desire, every whim, you would like easily be destroyed, um, or led astray. Um, so I guess an important part is that being able to identify uh, which desires arise from where. Like
mm,
the origin of the desire is really important. Like, is this desire arising out of an insecurity, like an egoic
yeah,
insecurity, or a feeling of lack in some way? Or is this a desire that's sort of arising out of the creativity of the soul? Like this
yeah. Like,
desire
why
to
do I
create,
want this?
yeah.
Um,
And you can sort of feel that when, like, let's say you're making this beautiful piece of art or you're thinking about it and you just feel so excited and so inspired. We could say that's sort of desire that's coming from the deeper layers of the psyche. Whereas when you then make the painting and you worry about, oh, how much should I sell it for? Is anyone going to like it?
yep.
Whatever. Those could be sort of decisions being made out of fears of lack and separation.
No, that well, there's something like really there's a good example that popped in my head there as you were saying that. So like a few months ago, like we were planning our like, so we're going on a cruise in November. Me and my fiance. Um, and like we're going to Cozumel, but we'll only be there for like a day because like we're on a cruise. So I was like, I'd really love to go back to that area, rent a car and like drive around Mexico. And like at first he was like, oh, okay, that'd be cool. Because like, I wanted to like drive the Pan American Highway for like a very long time. Like for the past like couple of years, I've thought that was like a pretty cool idea. It's been a desire of mine. And then like, he tells me that, well, hey, like I feel like I'm not 100% sure if like renting a car and driving around Mexico is like a very good idea. It's like a pretty unsafe there. But I'm like, oh, I mean, like, come on, it'll be fine. Like that's all like propaganda. Like, and then and then like he tells me this story. I'm like a month later about some people from her work who went to Mexico and they were on this bus. And on the bus, the people like literally had to have machine guns to protect themselves because like the cartel is like everywhere.
Dude,
Um,
Greg, I can't believe you just said that.
what?
Did I tell you about the dream that I just had
No.
with me and my sister?
What? What? What?
Oh
What
God.
happened?
It was so odd and specific, but it was me and my sister driving on the border of Texas, like near Mexico.
Oh shit. Yeah.
And someone warned me in the dream and said, try not to pay too much attention to the the sides of the streets because there's going to be a lot of bodies there from the cartels. And
Oh fuck.
I'm driving along the street and I'm seeing all these bodies, all without heads. They've been decapitated. And
Shit.
me and my sister make it to a gas station that's also like a McDonald's, like in real life. And
Yeah.
um, someone comes up to us in the store after we buy what we need to buy and is like, since you have a woman with you, we have to actually bring your car around to the front and she has to quickly get in so that the cartels
Mm,
don't notice that you have a woman with you. And so my sister had to like
yeah.
get into the car and then it just like turned into some other random dream. But it was so vivid and so like kind of down to earth, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, what? Why did I have this dream about like Mexico and the cartels? Because I wasn't really like watching anything about that
Yeah.
recently. So I thought it was just funny that you were talking about that.
No, yeah, like because like there was a time when Mexico was safe to travel through, and like people, like the hippies would be driving through Mexico all the time, like back in the 70s and shit. But that's not the case anymore. Mexico is a dangerous place. Because like if you think about all the migrants who made it to America, they all
They're
had to
running for
pass
a
through
reason.
Mexico.
They're running away for a reason.
Yeah. No, like, yeah, I mean, Mexico is dangerous. So like, why did I desire this so badly? And it's like, part of it was like this, like maybe a feeling of lack or like this feeling for like a search of adventure. But it's like this lingering search for adventure that I don't quite need anymore. Like, I had that before because I felt repressed. But now that I'm like happy with my life, it's like these are like lingering desires that like I'm only having because I've attached myself and my identity to them. And it's like,
Or you become so stationary. Maybe they are holistic desires, or how do you say, like maybe they are good desires and it's just your soul pointing you toward more adventure. You don't have to settle down and remain stationary for your whole life just
yeah.
because you've sort of settled down with
But
a partner.
at the same time, you can compromise and do different kinds of travel that don't involve the cartel potentially
I don't, yeah, exactly.
abducting your girlfriend. Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, exactly. I I thought
Like,
you were trying to say, oh, I shouldn't have any adventure.
no, 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 no. Like I'm saying um like
the adventure to that specific place.
You don't have to attach like you don't have to attach yourself to like I was attached to that idea and that specific kind of adventure, but I didn't realize that, oh, I can also let go of that adventure and maybe adventure somewhere else where I won't get killed.
Right.
You know
No,
what I
that
mean?
is a good example. Like a desire that's kind of based on an attachment, like maybe
Yeah,
attached
like
to the idea of Mos
yep,
or idea of Mexico from the hippie era.
yep, yep, exactly. And I think like a lot of what makes desire so bad is that we attach ourselves to specific kinds of desires. And if we don't get those desires, we get mad or angry when, hey, we can actually choose to not desire that and desire something else instead. Or like,
We're rigid. We're
but
rigid with our desire for
yes, yes. And if you kind of do what it says here, what we were just talking about, and kind of examine where your desires come from, you can kind of be able to then, I guess, shift your desire in a different direction,
right. Or yeah,
like a better path,
choose
one
a
that
better
doesn't involve
path.
the cartel.
Right. Like another example could be like um yeah, a desire, yeah. Let me there's probably I'll think of a good example sometime. Just like when we desire, let's say we desire a specific person really bad, we
Yep.
see this person in class and we're just like,
Mm,
wow, they are
yep.
so attractive. I want to be with them. And we become obsessive and compulsive, blah, 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 blah. But the desire that we have is really just a feeling of belonging and a feeling of being wanted with someone that we want.
Mm,
But we've
yep.
sort of collapsed that desire all down into one person. And so then when we don't get
Yep.
them, we're all upset. But it's not that the
Yep.
desire for belonging is bad or the desire to feel loved. It's just that have made the desire conform to such a small little image,
Yep.
and when
A
that
box.
fails, a
Right.
box, we squander it and we smother it. When if we understand, oh, this is just a desire for belonging, we can
Yep.
expand our horizons and be more receptive to other
Yep.
ways that that belonging could come.
Yeah, and then like at one point, at least with me, like I met someone that makes me feel that sense of belonging, that makes me feel safe when I'm around, that makes me feel loved. And when you get that, it's like, oh, like I get it. Like I was um it's not ever the specific person, it's that feeling, right? And if you meet that person that gives you that feeling, then like that's when like you'll feel happy, like you know what I mean? Like you weren't look like it's just like what you're saying, like you get attached to that one idea of a person and you have a crush, you become obsessive with it. And
Which is
then you like,
fine if it's
yeah,
reciprocated. Like I
yeah,
guess
yep,
that
exactly.
my example was not trying to say, oh, don't fall in love with a person because of
No, no,
specifically
no,
their
no.
qualities. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but like, you take that person on a date and then it's like, oh yeah, I don't feel loved by you. I don't feel like a sense of belonging. Like I feel shitty around you actually. And there's like that sense of betrayal that we were talking about earlier where it's like I thought this was supposed, I thought love was supposed, but it's because you were attached um to that person being the full image of love, of what love is. And when you actually get with that person, you realize that they don't show that same kind of love to you, right?
Attached to the form. Yeah.
Yet we transcribe the form of love into one being and we ideate ourselves upon that being. Like I was ideating the form of travel and adventure onto renting a car in Mexico and driving around. Where he's, well, actually, I could get that same sense of adventure somewhere else, without dying,
Yeah.
right?
All right. Should we move on
All right.
to
And this one's interesting. I kind of read it like while we were talking. Um, I'm interested to see what you think about it. Four kinds of virtuous men worship me, or Arjuna. They are the distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the wise, O Lord of the Bharatas. So what do you think of this? Like the distress. So like first let's
I
start with the distress.
I really like this quote. And while I was reading it, I was like sort of contemplating like which one of
Hmm.
these am I? Which led me to sort of
Mm,
search more for, and then
yeah.
I was like, oh, it's probably the distressed. But then I realized I had sort of passed through every single stage
Yeah.
of these. I have sort of sought the mystery because of my distress. I have sought it because
Mm.
just wanting knowledge about the world I'm in and wealth as well, and maybe
And
just
like wealth
be,
doesn't mean money necessarily. It could mean just like good fortune, right?
oh no, I wanted to be rich. No, I'm just kidding. But filthy rich. No, but no, I thought it was a cool thing. That as I was
Yeah.
contemplating this, I realized, oh, like I've sort of been the seeker in for all these different reasons over the years.
Yeah,
Um,
because like at least like from my own story, like along those lines, like I started off distressed because like I felt kind of betrayed by Christianity, um, in the sense that like they were saying some things that implied that I would go to hell. And I'm like, what? Like I'm not gonna worship this God, right? And then at that point, I really started to seek knowledge, right? I became the seeker of knowledge, and especially like in college, just like wanting to know more about like like reading philosophy, reading psychology, things like that, or like my experience in um like I guess all throughout my school years, like really being interested in astronomy and space and science, right? Like wanting to know God from that aspect in a way. And like the seeker of wealth, like I want to have good fortune. I want to like I'm seeking the divine because I want to, I guess, feel enlightened in a sense. Um, and then what do you think about the wise?
I think it's sort of saying maybe the wise recognize that like the most fulfillment comes from cultivating like a deeper spiritual purpose. So there's not like this ulterior motive to seeking the divine, but simply the recognition that like everything
Hmm.
else is empty. Not like, yeah, like everything else doesn't suffice as an answer to longing
Yeah.
and dissatisfaction. Um, and I feel like that was sort of
Mhm.
like after the distress of my younger years, I think that's sort of where the realization that I came to, which is why even after all these years, I sort of not that it's like on the forefront of my mind all the time, but it's always at least somewhere in the back. It's like it never leaves my mind, the sort of
Yeah.
goal or like a sort of general sort of direction that I like would like to attain spiritually because of that recognition that no matter what I do, no matter how much wealth I obtain or whatever awesome partner I have or anything that I do, it'll always be this sort of short temporary experience. It'll never replace this long lasting sort of fulfillment. So I
Yeah.
really like that. But I do like the distress quote a lot because I feel like I
Yeah.
relate
The
more
distress.
to the distress. And I feel like distress and agony is like one of the most powerful messengers toward deeper seeking. Like there's that
Yeah.
one quote. I think it's like a Christian quote, but they say there's no atheist in a foxhole. So like when you're getting bombed and you're seeing everything explode around you and you're in
Yeah.
shell shock, like whether or not you believe in God before that, you believe in God now because you're praying to something,
Yep.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
and and distress has this beautiful aspect of it. It's where you're weakened. All of your
Mm.
vulnerabilities and sort of intellectual constructs are all weakened because you're in such an agonizing state that you're willing to try or contemplate things that you haven't contemplated before. So
Yeah.
it's like this, it's a very effective messenger, I think,
Yeah.
for
Like,
that journey.
well, I think you're also like willing to step outside of your ego and kind of look for something higher than yourself
Right.
too.
You
So like
say,
when you're,
oh,
yeah,
you're like everything that the ego that I have brought myself thus far obviously has not done shit. So
yeah,
like exactly like your 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 ego is in this state of vulnerability where it's willing to maybe look a little farther or look in a different
yeah.
direction.
Because there is like a certain level of stubbornness towards the divine, I guess. Um, where like when I was like a hardcore atheist, I'm like now I'm agnostic. Um, but when I was a hardcore atheist, I had this like intense stubbornness to like anything associated with God or the divine, ghosts, anything like that. Instantly said, no, I'm not going to believe that, even though I would like be like all into the UFOs and stuff, right? Um, uh, I had this like intense stubbornness to say no to anything like that, right? Because it all I mean, again, it all stems from that initial betrayal, but when you feel that distress, there's like um you can kind of open yourself up to seeing something higher. And I think that's also like an important thing that I learned in college when I felt a lot of distress. And I mean, sure, I opened myself to taking lots of things I shouldn't have, but um one of those experiences brought me closer to something um, where I was very open to the idea of God or like at least something similar to God, right?
Wait, talk about that a little bit more.
Like
What
taking mushrooms.
what happened during the trip that sort of made you contemplate a little bit more?
Yeah, and I don't think it was necessarily the trip itself, but I think the trip definitely,
Was that the scary
well,
one?
yeah, the scary one. I don't, well, there was kind of two that happened for me. And I'm not sure if I've talked about them on the pod, but the first one, I got really drunk and, like probably like blackout drunk. And if you black out drunk and you take mushrooms, the drunk goes away and now you're tripping, right?
Oh God.
So anyways, I, took mushrooms with my buddy. I won't name who he is, but obviously we both know who he is. A good friend of mine. And and basically I had thought that I died. I thought that I was dead. I was in the afterlife and everything felt forever. And I was walking down Main Street of Moscow at like 2 a.m. or like 3 a.m. And I had thrown my phone into the street and it was playing rock music. And I kept walking and I kept seeing like police like drive by or like ambulances. I saw, like you walk past the hospital when you're in Moscow, you walk past the police station, you walk past the churches, like all these like godly signs and stuff. And like you see like the crosses on the medical vehicles and everything. And it was a very like, wow, like I'm seeing all this stuff. It's very like intense for me. I felt like I was dead. And then I got to the end of the road and I went into Rosar's. And the reason why I was walking down Main Street is because when I thought I was dead, I was like, I should walk home, to Coeur d'Alene and help my mom set up the Christmas lights.
Oh,
And
oh.
and I was like, this is what I need to do. And anyways, I got to Rosar's, I went in, I was really thirsty, and I went and I was like, very much like not in a good state of mind. I'm sure from an outsider's perspective, I probably looked like a homeless lunatic. And anyways, I walked up to the clerk and I was like, "Hey, like I'm really thirsty." And then she's like, "Okay, there's a water fountain over there." And then I was like, "I don't have any money." And then she gave me a penny. And
Oh,
like I looked at the penny and it's almost like the world's like like she gave me like this the penny symbolized like her love and affection and like this feeling of like charity and like gratitude. And then I just looked at that penny and I was like, wow, like love is the answer or whatever. Um, but like the and
that's
like
cool.
after that I viewed love in like a different way where like and like I was very distressed. I had like basically post-traumatic stress disorder after that for like a few weeks. But another weird thing happened where the following day I was going down the street and I was gonna ask around, see if anyone like saw a phone on the street. It's like I don't know why. And like obviously anyone would think that's a stupid idea. Why would you just go around asking random people if they saw a phone on the street? But the first person I asked, literally the first person I asked as I was walking down the street, he told me he was like, "Oh, a phone on the street, like one playing rock music." And I'm like, "Yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah." He was like, "Yeah, my buddy was telling me about this phone that he found this morning. It was just
Whoa,
blaring rock music." And then I was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
man.
And I was like, "That's my phone." And then he's like, "Damn." So like I coordinated with the guy and I got my phone back.
Wow, that's a synchronicity if I've ever heard one.
No, it was like a really weird experience. So like at that point I was very like a lot more open to like uh,
Do you happen to know which rock song you were listening to? I'm just curious. Do you happen to remember
uh
that?
yeah, I can actually find it real quick.
I think
At
it's cool
least
because of the
I might not be able to actually.
the clerk that gives you the penny and that feeling of charity and love, and then that you just happening to run into a guy who just happened to be roommates or friends with the guy who found your phone, and they just give it to you. They don't
Yeah.
try to steal it or anything. So it
Yeah.
seems like it kind of seems like the whole thing was about compassion, um, and
Yeah,
love,
and
and
I
just
was like walking past like police cars and none of them tried to like pull me over and be like, "Hey, you're underage drinking, like you're like a
I'm
minor
con
under the influence."
I'm convinced of this like plot armor that you get while you are on psychedelics. Like
Yeah.
it's like no matter what happens, like the cops just don't see you or they don't notice or and you are just like immune. Like every time that like I don't know if I've heard a story of someone being like, okay, there's probably been
Yeah.
tons of people who've been tripping and got arrested. But for me,
Yeah,
I
just not
always,
us.
yeah, just not us. It always seemed like there was some weird kind of plot armor um
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, it's like well, but like also when you're on the psychedelics, like a lot of times you don't do anything like stupid like you would if you're like blackout
You
drunk.
right, you just think you're being really
Yeah, and
crazy.
like because all I was doing was literally walking down the street. So like
Right, exactly. Like why would you be arrested? Yeah.
so like I did throw my phone in the street, like but I'm not sure if that's illegal to throw your phone in the street. I don't know, but well, I mean, no one witnessed it, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely want to know what song you were listening to. I wonder
Yeah,
if
I'll try
it
to look into it. I had
also
like got rid of my old Spotify, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it again. Um,
do you also
it's not an
know
old song, but go ahead.
do you know if the penny was heads up or heads
Heads.
down? That's cool because I kind of thought of like, oh, keep your head up,
Mm,
heads up.
yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like it was a very like because when you have an experience like that, everything in the experience has meaning. Like you find
Hmm.
meaning in every single part of the experience. And I think that's a good practice with like mysticism is to like just and I heard this also on the Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast. It's like just for fun, like one day, just like start trying to find meaning in everything. And eventually you'll start to find all these synchronicities, you know?
Right. And I think finding meaning in like neutral things by like the mind of the
Yeah.
intellect is seen as like a negative thing. Like,
Hmm.
oh, they're applying meaning where there is none. And so they're sort of
Where there is
creating this
none.
sort of story. But
Yeah.
um it is really weird because while you're in an experience like that, you're like completely convinced, like you know that there's
Yeah.
this meaning going on. And it's not really something I think that's kind of what's beautiful about the mystery of all of it is you want to be able to put that experience into a lab
Yeah.
and be like, oh, was there a meaning in this? No,
Hmm.
you know,
Yep.
it,
But it's like,
well,
well, it's like human nature to find meaning in things, you know?
right.
And a lot of times in our daily lives, we just don't, I guess we like lose, like as you get older, you kind of lose your like curiosity for things. Because like as a child, you find synchronicities all the time. You know, you find meaning in everything. And like as you get older, you kind of stop doing that. You get, because we get entrenched in the illusion.
And a lot of meanings are like told to us,
Yeah.
like, oh, you have to be corporate, you know,
Yeah.
slave, and that's the way to be successful. I also think a lot of the sort of depression that we have nowadays, the mental health crisis, has to do with a lot of the old meanings are breaking down. Like,
Mm, yeah.
let's say when
Like God is
in
dead.
yeah, God is dead, like Christianity has sort of broken down as the overarching, well, it's still a lot of people in the West, but
Yeah.
it's like losing it's not like the mainline kind of thought anymore.
Yeah.
It's losing ground. And there's there hasn't been many sort of suitable paths to fulfillment that have risen up to replace it. And there's
Yeah.
all of these competing meanings. Like it's
Hmm.
no longer okay, just love God, find a girl, get a white picket fence. There's so many other
Yeah.
things like influence, become an influencer, become, you
Yeah.
know, like, and I think that's where a lot of people are struggling is we don't have a
Yeah.
direct, a simple path toward fulfillment anymore, like
Yeah.
an agreed upon path.
Yeah. It's um, like we're not told to just focus on these simple things. We're told to focus on trying to become an influencer, like
Shake
trying to
your
become rich
ass.
and famous. Yeah, um, versus, all you have to focus on in life is um like loving God, raising a family, and um that's it.
It's yeah,
And it's
it's
like, okay, and it's up to you to figure out how to raise them, how to provide for them, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the main thing. Just do that.
there was a simple structure, and I feel like it
Yeah.
did. I feel like it served well. I think
Yep.
even if we could point out some flaws in sort of Christianity or whatever, like having
Yeah.
a structure like that gives people a framework to work within. And then if they need
Hmm.
to sort of step outside of it and expand, they can, but at
Yeah.
least they have a path to follow, which we don't
Yeah,
have
but
anymore.
I will say that I do think that history follows like a cyclical path. So I think um like we had that, but I think there was times in the past where we experienced a similar thing where the old meanings lost value and people are in chaos.
Right. Like the Renaissance or the Great Enlightenment or those
Mhm.
kind of periods.
Yep, and then
Um,
those things rise up again, you know.
right. This is
Um,
something interesting I learned about
yeah,
years ago, but and I wish I could find it because maybe we could do an episode on it. But it
yeah.
was this guy who was he, like other people, noticed that there was a cyclical pattern to civilization, the rise and
Yeah.
fall of civilization. And he thought, maybe what if I looked at the like a graph showing the rises and falls of civilization, and also found the other like graphs toward like global warming and global cooling. And he just took various things that we usually don't put together, like the fall and rise of civilization and these other cycles. And what, at least according to him, I can't remember exactly, but he said it's clear that these things follow a very cyclical pattern. Like
Mhm.
the rise and falls of civilization also sort of happen with these changes in the cyclical
Mhm.
pattern of the stars or whatever, 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 and even like
Yeah.
ideas, the kind of ideas that rise up and crop back down. So it'd be interesting to look at that and sort of see maybe the different ways that we exist in a
Well,
cyclical.
there's also a reason why the ancients were so obsessed with the stars, and like so obsessed with like tracking celestial bodies and everything, and like
Right,
the solstice and everything like that. Like there's a reason for that. And a lot of it is
right.
because
It
they
was like a
thought,
map.
yeah, yeah, yep, yep, exactly. It's like a map, and that's like how they made a lot of like prophecies and everything, right? Um,
Yeah, I believe it. And yeah, I think we definitely lost, like, we don't even talk about these kind of cycles.
no,
Even like with like maybe the stock market or whatever, that probably happens in a cyclical
yeah,
pattern. And if you could sort of identify some kind of
yeah.
underlying pattern, maybe you'd be a rich man. I don't know.
Well, we can't like the stars are, you know, I guess blocked off by our lights, our
That's
city
kind
lights.
of,
We became,
it's
yeah,
like a symbol. It's kind of like
yeah,
a symbol of like we have become so obsessed with technological progress and this sort of
yeah.
logical intellect. It's literally blocking off the sort of wisdom of the stars and the intuition
Yeah, and like
because,
what are the stars, right? The stars were the first gods, like
mhm.
we looked up at the sky and like, wow, like that's God. Like we'd see something like my if I close all these, we'd see some. I mean, we obviously wouldn't see this, but I mean, you see something that's as beautiful as this, right? When you look up at the night sky. But now we like don't really see that anymore, or at least it's hard to see.
Did you, this is kind of another tangent, but did you see
Yeah,
the new, I don't know, it was the telescope that was more recent than Hubble, I think, that was able
yeah,
to get even more highly pixelated images of like the fingers or columns of God or whatever they call them. Um, I
yeah.
don't know. I was watching a YouTube video that was
I haven't
showing,
seen that. Oh,
oh, that's something you should definitely look into. They have more higher resolution pictures of some of these
oh wow.
amazing nebula structures now.
Also, like I heard that like a lot of those images are also like not exactly how they would look to the naked eye.
No, no,
Yeah.
they
And I
filled them
didn't
in.
realize, yeah, I didn't realize that until like just I didn't find that out until like maybe a year ago. I was like, oh wow, like I feel lied to, like that's not what they would actually look like.
Yeah, no, I think I found that out this year too. I thought it was
Yeah.
actually taking photos of that, but no, they
Yeah, it's like
see
a
the little
thermal
lights.
thing or something. I
Hmm.
don't know.
And they sort of just guess or they have an algorithm fill it in. But I feel lied to as well.
Those fucking assholes. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we'll continue. We'll continue. Of them, the wise, ever steadfast and devoted to the one, excels. For I am exceedingly dear to the wise, and he is dear to me. But yeah, I also want to say something about like the wise. Like whenever you see a wise person depicted in cinema, such as like Yoda from Star Wars or Iroh from Avatar: Last Airbender. Whenever you see these wise figures like the wise old man, um, like they're always happy. They're always like anything that goes wrong, whatever, they like throw it over their shoulders. Um, because they have a deeper understanding of the world where they're okay with things going wrong. They're okay with dying because like they feel one with the world almost, you know. Um, yeah. I am exceedingly dear to the wise, and he is dear to me.
It's a committed relationship.
Yep. Noble indeed are all these, but I deem the wise man as my very self. For
Uh,
steadfast in mind, he's established in me alone as the supreme goal.
I deem the wise man as my very self, for steadfast in mind, he is established in me alone as the supreme goal.
Mm,
Oh, that's really cool. Like, yeah, the wise man has made God his sole aim and concentration.
yep.
So why,
Yeah.
when he's like become the thing he's concentrated on, the wise man is
Yep.
me. That's really cool.
Yeah, and that's like God in its many forms, right? Um, and if like God in um if God is love in your interpretation, you make love the supreme goal. Um, I think even that and that alone is very wise, right? That's like the wisest thing you could possibly do. Um, is just give
That's
love to everyone, right? And like take love as the supreme goal.
that's where like Rumi and the
Yeah.
Sufis sort of created
Yep.
their approach to God was they sort of equated finding God to romantic love and to sort of look
Mm,
upon God as if it was a loving partner and to
yeah.
sort of just be one pointed on that. And I really like their sort of interpretation or just of focusing on the quality of love, I guess.
Yep. Yep. I'll let you read this one.
At the end of many births, the wise man comes to me, realizing that all of this is Vasudeva, the innermost self. Such a great soul, Mahatma, is very hard to find.
This would be the innermost self. Such a great soul is very hard to find.
That's the other one I
But-
liked a lot. Like the man that searches for God is
yeah.
realizing that God is the innermost self of the person. So they're just peeling
Mm,
back the layers, the illusory layers of their identity until all that's left is God.
mm. And then you become almost like the avatar of God, like in a way, like or at least like you try to represent what God is through all of your being, basically. You try to take on the divine qualities and um, I guess enact them through your daily life in a way.
Yeah, no, I like that. Realizing that this is all Vasudeva. Oh,
Yeah,
that this Vasudeva.
that this Vasudeva. Wait, realizing that all this is Vasudeva. It is the innermost self, right? Right.
At
And
the
then
end of
those whose wisdom has been rent away by this or that desire go to other gods, following this or
I
that right, led by their own
that
nature.
that one's a good
Mm.
one. Those whose wisdom has been rent away by this or that desire go to other gods. And those gods are like the idols. Like
Yeah, like the false idols. And I think a lot of this is like, um, I think in a way,
idol of
like
money.
this document is like simplifying it in a way. Like they're not explicitly saying what the other idols can be, they're not giving examples. But yeah, like it's just like what you're saying. It can be money, it can be sex, it can be like any sort of thing that you kind of put all your focus on, all your attention, um, whatever you make as your supreme goal. If you make money as your supreme goal, um, you know, you'll go the way of the demons.
Their
Right?
wisdom has been rent away.
Yep.
I like that. And it's also like I like the word rent away because
Yeah.
by giving your sort of focus to these sort of false gods like money and sex
Yeah.
or whatever it is, it takes something away from you as well. It's
Yeah.
being rented away, but it doesn't give back. But like God gives back.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
Exactly.
use the word rent away to when it's talking about that
Yeah.
focus on God.
Yeah, I think you have to get a little closer to your mic.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. But yeah, no, I like that where it's like if you focus on these other things, like they're not going to give back to you and they're actually going to leech on you, right? Like a parasite. Like putting all your focus on money is not going to make you happy. And in fact, by doing so, you're going to spend your life working and you're not going to spend it getting closer to the people you love or like putting love out into the world. You're going to spend it worshiping money, a false god. And then it says, whatsoever form any devotee desires to worship with faith, that same faith of his I make firm and unflinching. Endowed with that faith, he engages in the worship of that form, and from it he obtains his desire, these being verily ordained by me. Verily, the reward that accrues to those men of small intelligence is finite. The worshippers of the gods go to them, but my devotees come to me. The foolish think of me, the unmanifest, as having manifestation, knowing not my higher, immutable, and most excellent nature. So I kind of just like thought I'd read a few of
Yeah,
these.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, I am not manifest to all as I am, being veiled by the Yoga Maya. This deluded world does not know me, the unborn and imperishable. I know, O Arjuna, the beings of the past, the present, and the future, but no one knows. So that's an interest. So, because like, if you take that in context of everything that has been said thus far, he's so like, um, Krishna is saying like he knows what kind of men come to him and what kind of men don't come to him because he knows all beings, whether they be of the past, the present, or the future, right? And he knows what actions lead to what. Because like even to like, and that really like opened your mind because he might be saying this in like 500 BC to Arjuna, but Krishna already knows what's going to happen in 2024, right? He sees the prime, at least the prime example as we know it, of what happens when you worship false gods and false idols, like celebrities or politicians or money or, power, like whatever the fuck it is, right?
I
Um,
like this emphasis
yeah.
on God being the unmanifest, because that goes into
Mm,
like the forms and how whenever we try to
yeah.
worship something specific or say exactly what God is, that's a manifest
Yeah.
form. When the
Mm.
me of him
It's the
is the
unmanifest.
unmanifest, which is like, yeah, who gets to witness that in the complete unmanifest, the void
Yeah.
of all things? Um, and no one knows me, and it's because we might think we know God or whatever, but all we
Yeah.
have are these manifest forms that we've
Yeah.
attached ourselves to.
Yeah. Like the Tao that can be known is not the eternal Tao. Um, and it's also going back to the wise man. Like the wise man is curious, they're open, right? And I think um, part of that curiosity and openness is kind of making God like the ultimate goal or like making, like the divine the ultimate goal, whatever you want to say. Because by being curious and being open, you open yourself up to the unmanifest, right? Because you open yourself up to all that has been manifested, right? And like hidden under all that has been manifested is the unmanifested, which cannot be seen.
The wise let go of stories.
Yeah. Yep.
So they're not viewing God through these stories and constructs.
Or like these like specific things. Or like
Right.
they don't have attachments to any one version of it. Right.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like that's like a good point.
By the delusion of the pairs of opposites arising from desire and aversion, all beings are subject to delusion at birth. So I definitely need help interpreting this one. I'm like, the
The
pairs of
pairs of
opposites arising. Yeah. Go
but
ahead.
the delusion of the pairs of opposites just sounds to be it talking about the illusion of duality, good and bad, dark and
Mm,
light. And it's a delusion because light and darkness don't actually exist. There's just
yep.
light and the absence of light in those degrees, which kind
Mm.
of goes into that
Yeah, like
hermetic.
hermetic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That you sent me.
des desire and aversion, like we desire some things and we try to avert from fears and from
Yeah.
hardship. And that sort of path um is in that middle way where you're not where
Mm,
your personality doesn't really affect what I don't know how to say it. You can go below the layers of personality that are trying to
yeah.
desire for something and avert something else and just sort
Yeah.
of follow that thread through. I guess
Yeah. I
that
kind of
next
understand
sentence.
that like desire and aversion are the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Desire aversion is just the desire to not have a certain
Yeah.
experience.
Because, well, yeah, this is something I have like I've never really thought of before. Because like when it says desire is the root of all suffering, like in Buddhism, well, part of what desire is also aversion too,
Right. Aversion to bad
right?
experience, aversion to
Fear.
negative emotions. Yeah.
Yeah. Like having fear, right? Like fear of death or fear of anything really causes suffering. And I like
Desire,
go ahead.
I was gonna say like non-desire and non-grasping and non-aversion are really big concepts in Tibetan Buddhism
Okay.
and in Tibetan dream yoga. Just
Okay.
understanding that the desire and the averting of things.
Yeah. Well, it's like like observe your thoughts. Like let the bad thoughts come and go, let the good thoughts come and go. Right.
Right.
Um, right. So, but those men of virtuous deeds whose sins have come to an end, and who are freed from the delusion of the pairs of opposites, worship me steadfast in their vows. Those who strive for liberation from old age and death, taking refuge in me, realize in full that Brahman, the whole knowledge of the self and all action. Those who know me with the pertaining to the elements, the pertaining to the gods, and the pertaining to sacrifice, know me even at the time of death, steadfast in mind. I think the first thing that like comes to mind here, um, I'm kind of like skipping, almost like skipping like these parts. Um, I like the part where he's saying like, hold on, accidentally do it. Okay. So there's kind of like three aspects to like knowing God, I guess. You can know God through nature, the world pertaining to elements. You can know God through gods, like through the gods. So, which I kind of need to like understand by like knowing the difference between the gods and like false idols, I guess. And then pertaining to sacrifice, so you can know God by sacrificing things, like, and I think a lot of love involves sacrifice, or like, I guess almost setting aside your desires, for something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Like those people who've sacrificed enough to be on that one pointed path
Yeah,
know me even at the time of death. That is interesting that it's saying like pertaining to the elements and pertaining to the gods, though, because of like the
yeah.
way it talks earlier, like not putting too much attention on these things, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
Like you have to know all three.
yeah, like you have to know. So it's almost like the elements is nature, right? Sacrifice is your actions, almost. Like this is like your observation, this is your actions, and this is what you focus on, your like worship, almost like what you worship, right?
Okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
So it's like we can observe the world, uh, so we can know God through observation, through like meditation, feeling sensations, just knowing it through the elements, right? And we can know God by choosing what we
Devotion,
worship. Yeah, by
devotional
devotion.
practices.
Yep. And then also by our actions, by sacrificing, say, our desires or whatever it is for a higher purpose.
I like that. What chapter was this in of the Bhagavad
This
Gita?
is chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita.
And it follows a narrative, right? It's told in a progression, or is it? It's not random
Yeah.
passages like the Upanishads, right?
No. But it sure as hell feels random when you're reading it. So,
Yeah, I was listening to an audiobook and I was like, oh shit.
yeah. Um, all right. Well, I guess we'll get to Seth next week. Um, I feel kind of mysticized out for the day. I feel kind of godded out. I'm not sure if I can yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
time to
might have
return. It's time to return to our illusion for a little bit.
yes, I'm ready to go back to the illusion.
We need
Um
to go back to the Matrix.
all right, let's go back to watching that debate.
Okay. Yeah, I
But
want to see
all
something.
right. Well, I guess we'll end the podcast there. Thank you to all those who are listening to this, diving into yet another illusion. This is the illusion of the Into the Absurd podcast, and I hope that your desires brought you here, but they don't bring you to being slaves to the demons and the false idols. So, anyhow, thank you for listening and take it easy.